weekly coronavirus update, bringing you world-class experts, subject matter experts to talk to you about health, about economy, about business, best practices, so that you can be informed, you can take better decisions. I am Claudia Romo Edelman, and this is the HispanicStar.org channel. As you might remember, we had a Hispanic Star campaign to change the perception of Hispanics, that we had to completely pivot and use and readjust all our infrastructure, our networks, and our alliances to make sure that we can respond to COVID. The objective of the Hispanic Star in action is to make sure that we together create collective action and mitigate the impact of COVID-19, particularly in those that are affected the most: small businesses, entrepreneurs, independent workers, and co-workers from the gig economy, the sharing economy, the service industry, the agriculture industry. We are here providing a clearinghouse for information and action, and it is a pleasure to welcome you all here. I am delighted to have such a lineup of speakers that are devoting their time to make sure that Hispanic leaders are informed and that we're together creating a sense of community and data that can inform our actions and inform our communities. Today, we're going to be hearing from the lineup. The featured speakers today are Dr. David Nabarro, the Special Envoy of the World Health Organization, Director General on COVID-19, Gillian Tett, the Chair of the Editorial Board and Editor-at-Large of the Financial Times US, Fabian Garcia, the President of Unilever North America, Cristina Antelo, Principal from Ferox Strategies, Ramiro Cavazos, President and CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce USHCC, and Jason Marczak, Director of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center of the Atlantic Council. I want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for coming to this Tuesday weekly update on COVID-19. We're going to start with a video message of Dr. David Nabarro, who very last minute had to cancel on being here for an emergency. Michelle, let's run David Dr. Nabarro message for the Hispanic leadership.
Good day to all of you. Thank you for the chance to be interacting with you again after my opportunity last week. I thought I'd start by giving you an update of where I believe the pandemic is going around the world. I'd like to focus a little bit on Latin America this time. I'd like to consider what the implications of the current outbreaks are for the way in which communities and businesses work, and to offer some pieces of advice, particularly about coming out at the end of this series of outbreaks. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to interact with you all, the leaders of the Hispanic community right across the whole of the Western Hemisphere. You are so important in bringing people together to respond to this threat and in helping them to find the path that is best for them and their families. As we look at the information that's coming in, we see that the pandemic is continuing to expand very rapidly, and it's now moved from having its epicenter in Europe to being now centered pretty much in the US, but there are emerging outbreaks all over the world, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, and right across Europe. And that is having a really huge impact on the levels of suffering and death. And it's also, because of the control measures, having an impact on people's livelihoods. And it's really the people in the informal economy who are on daily wages who are most threatened by what we're seeing. What tends to happen, of course, is that you feel a sense of helplessness as the numbers of people getting sick and dying arising. You hear ambulances and you wonder, is this somebody you know? And it's a very, very difficult time for everybody. But what I'm seeing is that the message is getting through, that this pattern of outbreaks can be reduced through interrupting transmission by enabling people who've got the symptoms to be isolated from everybody else, through protecting those with particular needs, like older people, disabled people, or people who are looking after families all on their own. And I think that interrupting transmission through isolating those with disease, even if you haven't got a test, is so important as a way of helping us understand what needs to be done. I'd like to stress that in addition to the interruption of transmission by isolation, we also have to do our best to reduce the opportunities for transmission by introducing physical discipline. And that's where lockdowns have become so important as parts of control. And the impact of lockdowns on the virus and its transmission is becoming clear. The numbers of deaths and indeed the numbers of reported cases in the parts of Europe that have the most intense outbreaks, that is Northern Italy and Spain, seem to be flattening off. We're reaching the peak. And similarly, we're seeing some signs of progress in parts of France. I hear good reports coming from the UK as well. And that means that it won't be necessary to go on with lockdowns forever, but it will be important that local communities become skilled at being able to defend themselves against COVID by identifying people with the disease for themselves and keeping themselves safe for the foreseeable future. My advice to everybody who is active in this struggle is work together, work with your fellow neighbors and with your fellow businesses and your members of your church and your community to make sure that you're able to get on top of this. And whatever religion, I should say, work with whatever religious group you're with, whatever community organization you have, because solidarity at the community level is absolutely key. Do what you can to support the health workers. Often members of your community will be working in hospitals as nurses, as doctors, as cleaners, as porters, as caterers, all people working in the health system. They are the heroes of the hour. We must support them so that they can deliver the service we need. And let's work together for recovery as well, for coming out at the other end as stronger, as healthier, and as more connected societies. Through this, we realize how important every single human being is. We often find it is the women who are having to do even more than the men. They're having to keep households going. They're often having to maintain their employment. And we look to women to be the source of support and encouragement for us all as we move forward. I'd like to give a special salute to Hispanic women for their leadership at this time. It is going to be solidarity that will ensure that we come out well. Whatever anybody who's in charge might say about one group being better than others, it's not like that anymore. It's solidarity that will enable us to find our way through, and the spirit of working together, just as we've discovered over the years in all societies. It's through working together that we're strong and can get on top of this threat, in line with what we've all learned to do with so many other threats that we face. So thank you for the chance to be with you and to make these remarks. I look forward to connecting again. And always I say, gracias. Thank you for all you're doing.
And thank you, Dr. David Nabarro, for those words. It's very important, I think, that for all of us to make sure that we understand the facts, but that we are able to move them to hope, and that we understand that we have to move from fear to action. I welcome Gillian Tett from the Financial Times. Thank you so much for being again with us from last week. Gillian, as you know, what we're trying to do is to provide a platform to educate every Wednesday, every Tuesday on our weekly updates on COVID, the state of the art of health and economy, businesses, and so on. So Gillian, I would like to ask you, what have you seen? What is the state of the art? How is the economy of the world doing? How long can businesses sustain these lockdowns all across the country? And also, lastly, I would like to ask you for Hispanic, particularly the Hispanic economy. And for that, I would like to read you a couple of data points. Hispanics, were 18.9 million Hispanics that work in essential functions. Over 1 million Hispanics work in healthcare. Over 1 million Hispanics are working food supply. And that does not include unregistered migrants. 1 million Hispanics work in transportation. Unemployment of the Hispanic community is increasing 25% faster than the rest of the population. And pre-COVID, Hispanic families were 39% more likely to need food assistance to feed their children than general population. So imagine now. So that really, that set of stats that I just read, make the case that Hispanics are disproportionately affected economically by COVID-19. So Gillian, state of the economy worldwide, how long do you think businesses can hold this, and how is the state of business in general? And what do you think that, what would you make of the case for Hispanics being disproportionately affected, and how can corporations help?
Oops, Daisy, am I muted? Sorry, 1 second. Can you hear me?
Good.
Not anymore.
Jill, you unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself again.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good. You're good.
Great. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I would add, first of all, good morning, everyone. It's fantastic to be on the call. I salute what Claudia's doing and what you're doing as a community to try and support each other and boost awareness and information. I would add another very important and very timely statistic to what Claudia's just said, which is that JP Morgan did a survey last autumn of how much spare cash on hand the small businesses in America had. And they worked out that on average, they had 14 days of their costs, which meant that if everything stopped, they could keep going for 14 days without any more money coming to the door before they'd be bankrupt. And that was on average. The scary part of that number was that the figures for low-income communities, and particularly ethnic minorities and for Hispanic groups, were dramatically smaller, half that. And that gives reason for both tremendous concern, but also a glimmer of optimism. Because as everyone knows, what's happened in the last few weeks has been absolutely brutal in terms of the growth outlook. But partly because of these very scary numbers about the cash on hand for businesses, what we are seeing now is also some sign of a government response to help in the form of a new program to roll out lending to small companies to keep small companies workers on the payroll. Now, I think you have other people on the call who will be talking about that scheme in more detail, but I just wanted to highlight that point to indicate both the tremendously negative, terrifying picture that's emerging in the economy, and in the last few days, we've seen all kinds of forecasts coming out from Wall Street banks that are projecting that in the US, you could see an annualized contraction of, say, 30% in the second quarter of the year. There's growing evidence or growing concern that that will then extend into the third quarter as well. There's unemployment rates being chucked around of 10, 15%, really quite much higher as well under some scenarios. These are really very scary numbers indeed. And what you are looking at in the global level is potentially a global economic contraction of a sort that we've not seen since World War II. That's the scale of potential damage we're looking at for the global economy as a whole. But the question people are asking is not simply to what degree will we see a rebound if or when we start to manage this terrible shock, and whether that will be, as I said last week, an L or a U or a V-shaped recovery, where we go down and up again sharp, or go down, stay down, and then come up. But also the degree to which we can or cannot see meaningful government action to try and soften those blows. From a macroeconomic point of view, what the US government is doing right now is absolutely astonishing. I mean, it is ripping up the free market playbook it's lived with for so many decades, and essentially interfering and intervening into almost every aspect of the economy. And whether it's in terms of acting like a wartime economy and forcing companies like 3M to make masks, or whether it's a scale of expansion at the central bank, which is absolutely unprecedented. I mean, we could see the central bank balance sheet essentially not just double, but triple, if not quadruple, in the coming 12 months. So the US government response, along with other countries, is absolutely dramatic. But what's still very, very unclear is whether that's going to be enough to actually offset this scale of the slump. And last point, the fact you've seen the equity market bounce up and down so dramatically is partly a sign of crazy amounts of robo-traders, essentially machines trading on the exchange, it's also a sign that most of the well-paid economists and investors themselves can't work out whether the scale of government action is going to be enough to offset the scale of economic damage, and which will come out on top. But as I say, for all of you who are a small business right now in the Hispanic community, what you do next is going to be very important for this overall economic picture.
Thank you so very much. I would love to hear a little bit more. Maybe we do it next week or next Tuesday. Would love to hear a little bit more about what you think. What you think the government, like, is getting pressure from corporate America of like lifting the lockdown and restart the economy, as I don't know how long is it going to be possible for companies to go on. So let's talk about that next Tuesday. Gillian, Tett, the Financial Times, thank you so much for being with us. And last November, I think, we were celebrating internally and celebrating as a community the rising of an incredible Hispanic star, a CEO of like of a global company, Fabian Garcia, who was named president of Unilever North America. We were celebrating him. We welcomed him at the Hispanic Leadership Summit at the United Nations as he became president of Unilever North America January 1st. And what a start, I would say, Fabian Garcia, one of our Hispanic stars. We're so proud of having a CEO of like a president like yours. What a start that you, like just getting into this job, all of a sudden coronavirus hits. And you have done, Fabian, an incredible response of the company. You have turned around Unilever and make sure that everything was devoted, that you extended credit to vendors and allowed suppliers to and paying suppliers fast. You have guaranteed paid and employment of your workers and also your subcontractors. You have a special, a special media and communications programs put to show products at work so that they can be useful for COVID. Welcome, Fabian Garcia, to talk to the Hispanic leadership. Tell us a little bit more about what Unilever's response has been to COVID-19, and again, if you can deep down in your thinking about how can, like you as a Hispanic leader, how can you think that we could respond, talking to, like Hispanic leaders here in this webinar, how can we respond as you being, like in corporate America, how can we follow a little bit more and join forces?
Thank you, Claudia, for the opportunity to be here and for your gracious introduction. Well, first of all, I am acting on behalf of a global company of the size of Unilever, and we have been committed to sustainable living everywhere as the main purpose of this company. So I have had the incredible opportunity to be here at a time when this crisis has hit. And I say incredible opportunity because obviously the times are unique, but this is when having a purpose counts. So it is said that, of course, crises bring the best out of people, and the same is true for companies. At Unilever, we're very focused on assuming our social responsibility at this time, and we have three basic areas where we are focused. One is caring for our people first. Second is ensuring full and continuous supply of the essential products that we sell. We sell food, we sell hygiene, and we sell cleaning products, and that's what people need right now the most. And last but not least is to commit to assist the most vulnerable communities where we serve. And I will speak a bit about the program we launched to that effect. If you think about it, this is all about protecting lives and protecting livelihoods. And the narrative that you had in the beginning was part of the global initiative that Unilever put in place, which was €100 million worth of donations around the world of our food, hygiene, and cleaning products. And very importantly, $500 million worth of working capital to protect the most vulnerable of our suppliers, these small companies that live off of customers like us. And we believe what they need now is cash. They need to have the certainty of survival while the economy has shut down. So when we all come back out of this, they will be in business, and we will be obviously partnering with them to grow their business along with ours. So that was very important in our plan, because we understand very well that they depend on us, many of them, for their livelihoods. When it comes to protecting our own employees, we have been quite responsible, I would say. First and foremost, making sure that both those at the front line, as well as those who can do their works from home, have the safest work environments. So all of our plants today are warehouses, and the people who are filling up those shelves in your favorite store, all of them are working with what we call level 4 safety protocols. So masks, protective equipment, and they are putting their lives at risk. They come to the plants. We do temperature checking for everybody who comes into our facilities, and obviously at a cost for the company, but it's the very minimum we can do to make sure that they are well protected. So it's very important for us. On a softer side, we're making sure that those who are working from home are also working on their mental health. And I don't know for you, but cabin fever has its own effects, and people start to climbing up walls after a while. And we provide them access to yoga classes, meditation, happy hours, after hours, of course, or tea. We have these wonderful brands that keep people connected. We provide for coffee breaks. We provide for all kinds of small little things that make your stay at home a bit more livable. And those who are working with kids at home, we're being very flexible. They determine the hours at which they want to work. So for anybody who's out there struggling with the notion of working from home, I would offer them access to whatever tools we can offer them to adopt in their own practices, because this, we believe, is not a short-term issue. We believe this is more months than weeks, and hopefully there will be no second wave, but if there were to be, we need to be prepared to work sustainably through our working from home months. So I don't want to get into our own expectations of time. We believe we will come back when it is safe. And for as long as we don't have the data as to supporting the safety of our facilities, we're working from home and working with the current setup. So it's we say internally, this is a marathon and not a sprint. So we better be prepared for all of us to have the mental sanity that comes with this new setup. We have also protected pay for at least 3 months. So some of our workers do 2 or 3 shifts. So we're basically saying that they will be paid at the very least what they were making before all this started, even if they were sick for whatever reason or had to be absent for whatever circumstance around their lives. You know, they're attending to somebody who is sick, they're attending to a parent who's at home, whatever the circumstance may be. So we want to make sure people have the notion of job security in the back of their minds, because that's the last worry you want to have right now in a company of our size. When it comes to the community, which I said it was last but definitely not least, we announced a couple of weeks ago a program called United for America. And that initiative consists of 3 big steps. First was an immediate donation of $8 million worth of product to Feed in America. Feed in America, as you probably know, has a network of food banks, 200 of them located strategically in communities that need the help the most. And although the name suggests it's all about food, Feeding America does more than just giving food away. In their food banks, they give the products that we produce that are so needed for people today. So we did that a couple of weeks ago. We also donated 200,000 masks to hospitals around the areas where we operate. So in the New Jersey hospitals and in Chicago, where we have 2 big facilities. And most importantly in our program is a commitment to a day of service. So on the 21st of May, Virt Safety, we will donate our time, and the products we would produce that day would all be donated. That's about $12 million worth of product. The idea is that all our employees will donate their time, and obviously we will donate our products and bring those products to those in need through our network of NGOs, mostly Feeding America. And the other part that I find very interesting here is we are going to donate the money that we spend in advertising and marketing for that day, so that we can make people aware of where to go to get these donations. And we're inviting all of our partners, be they retailers, media purveyors, maybe suppliers, everybody who works in our ecosystem is being invited as we speak to contribute in whatever way they can to come join us that day of volunteering. Some of our partners are telling us that they don't need money. What they need now is product. They need time. Some of the volunteers are not going to the food banks because they're afraid. So we believe taking action is the most powerful way to commit to our community. So we're also inviting our industry partners and competitors. So anybody who wants to pitch in is welcome, because this is about helping the country we love and helping the people who need it the most right now. And we alone understand we cannot do it, but obviously we together can get out of this with flying colors. So that's, I'll take the opportunity that I have, a little bit of time, to invite everyone to participate. Please give them my number or my email. We will find ways to get in touch with them so that we can all partner, because only united for America we will resolve this. Thank you for the time.
And Fabian, thank you so much. It is actually quite impressive to see the incredible comprehensive strategic response that you have put together for COVID-19. We would love to partner with you on Day of Service. We would love to make sure that the Hispanic coalition of leaders that we have is fully aware. We'd love to invite you back to talk closer to the time, to talk a little bit more about progress and see how we can actually do something particularly for Hispanics. I think that it would be very, very important. I also would love to make sure that, you know, from our side, I think that you have on the other line, just like a couple of speakers away, Ramiro Cavazos, who's the head of the USHCC, the Chamber of Commerce, with all the small businesses that would love to, you know, like be considered part of the supply chain of a company like yours. But we have to figure out a way so that it could be sustainable. Fabian, Garcia, we hope that we can keep you on the loop of what we're doing. This is the Hispanic Response and Recovery COVID-19 for all of us and all of us. So we'd love to have you back. Thank you so much for your time. And we're going to move now to hear about policy and hear what's happening inside Washington. Cristina Antelo, the principal of Ferox Strategies. Give us an update. Last week you were talking about COVID-3. How is everything going, and what's new and that we need to know about?
Sure. So as you mentioned, last week we talked about COVID-3, and so this week I want to talk a little bit about what's coming together as COVID-4, if you will, phase 4 of the package. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat from California, briefed the members of her conference yesterday about what phase 4 is looking like in the response bill. She hopes to have that ready to go by around April 20th. There have been some pumping of the brakes by the Republicans, whether or not it was needed in the last week or so after the first, or phase 3 was signed. But I think that it's becoming increasingly clear that she's right, that they are going to need to power through another phase. She predicts that phase 4 will be further another $1 trillion, will be another $1 trillion to add on to that. She wants to focus more money on the Paycheck Protection Act, Paycheck Protection Program that is being administered by the Small Business Administration and the loans that are established there. She wants to add more money to that to keep it sustained for at least another 2 months beyond its current June expiration date. Additionally, she wants to add more money for expanded unemployment insurance established in phase 3, which would add 2 more months in addition to what was provided for already. Additional funding for SNAP, additional funding for state and local aid with at least $250 billion set aside for small and medium-sized communities that have fewer than 500,000 people. She also wants to further direct payments to Americans. So there's a lot of talk about the payments that are going directly to citizens. She wants to have another round of these payments that could exceed the $1,200 provided for in phase 3. Also yesterday, former federal Fed Chair Janet Yellen consulted with members of the House. She has estimated that the real unemployment rate is probably around 13%, which is opposed to the 4% that was predicted by the Department of Labor. Obviously, the Department of Labor predicts those numbers on a lagging basis, so she thinks it's closer to 13%. She also predicts that GDP could contract by more than 30%, which I think Gillian mentioned earlier in her comments. Yellen took the opportunity to make some recommendations. She recommends further aid to state and local governments, as well as agencies like the Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, to prevent foreclosure crisis, which could follow if homeowners next are not able to make their payments, right? So you can kind of predict as the economy kind of unwinds the impacts that happen and ripple through. So she wants to see that we shore up the FHFA. Another one of her recommendations is to offer a safe harbor to banks that are administering the PPP program for any mistakes or fraud committed by borrowers in the program's early days to encourage banks to continue to implement the program. The SBA program has been weathered heavy demand in the first few days that it's been available. The SBA's platform has administered these loans, and it has reportedly crashed several times, as did Chase Bank's online platform for PPP. The offerings appear inconsistent. Bank of America says that they've had over 212 applications worth more than $30 billion total. Other banks like Wells Fargo and Citi are restricting participation. The Federal Reserve is soon going to begin buying these PPP loans from the banks. That's probably not going to direct more aid to small businesses, but the banks say that they need the support from the Fed to maintain federal capacity and to keep offering the PPP for folks that are applying. The wide demand has led for all parties to agree that more funding is needed, and so you're going to again see that in Corona 4 as we go forward.
Cristina, that was fantastic, very succinct, and I would love to just add to that if you could have a recommendation on the PPP programs and the SBA loans have gone like immediately through the roof in a couple of days. And I think that we have seen a number of banks putting restrictions that they are going to only be serving customers and so on. Is there anything that we should know about? And I hope that Ramiro can also light that, shine a light here on putting pressure on banks so that they can actually just like extend or do something bigger in terms of like if there's going to be a flow of cash from the government that banks actually take more and even not don't have more generous policies.
Sure. I think, again, by having the Fed come in and buy up some of that demand that's already been taken up, we want to be able to establish and support these banks that are there. It has become very clear how great the demand will be. I think everybody anticipated it, but now we have the data, we can see it, we see that's going on. I think that there are still a lot of businesses that put it out early because they knew that it was coming. So you kind of saw the initial crush, but I think what we'll be able to see over the next week is to see if that demand continues and if there's, if it's a steady stream, or if there is any kind of delay once you saw that initial crush come through. But again, I think the policymakers are already keen. A week ago, the Republicans were pumping the brakes, and now they're already agreeing. No, there will be Corona 4. Maybe it won't be as high in policy and additional items. For example, a week ago, we heard some conversations about having a lot of infrastructure involved in Corona 4. I think that now will be delayed to Corona 5, and that Corona 4 will be focused again on pumping even more money into the programs established and by shoring up any folks that were not already provided for in Corona 3. So again, cities with less than 500,000 people, as well as the hospitals needing more funding and things like that. Making sure that folks have the additional funds that they're needing.
Ramiro Cavazos, head of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. What's your response? Just like heard from Cristina on policy-wise, what's happening in in the world of the Chamber of Commerce? You probably have the largest network of small businesses of America. What's your take?
Well, Claudia, good morning to you and everyone. Thank you. It's a privilege to be on this panel with such distinguished leaders. We have 250 Hispanic chambers in America, 4.5 million Hispanic-owned businesses. The collective GDP of Latinos, as many of you know, with our 60 million Latinos is $2.2 trillion. The good news is before the COVID crisis hit many of us, we had a strong economy. We had higher levels of educational attainment, income levels. The challenge now, as we're hearing, is that we're building the plane as we're flying it to respond to the economic need of the Latino business community. 1 out of every 4 businesses that are Latinos are on the brink of closing at this time, and about half of our businesses are saying that they may be temporary closing, Claudia, because of this economic crisis. In surveying Latino businesses around America, there are 3 key needs. To be very specific, Claudia, is 56% need direct cash payments to continue to survive. 2, 30% of them need loans or financial assistance, and that's where the Paycheck Protection Program is coming in. And 21% need help in delaying or waiving payroll taxes. So those are the 3 great needs of Latino businesses right now. As of a day ago, $50 billion of the $350 billion had been committed to 178,000 different applications through the Small Business Administration and the banks. I agree with Cristina that we will have a phase 4 and a phase 5 of funding and legislation. I would urge everyone on this call to be very aggressive advocates with our legislative leaders to make sure that we include the things that are missing that are providing assistance to our small businesses. We have 30 million small businesses in America overall. 4.5 million are Latino and Latina-owned businesses, and 1 out of every 10 jobs in America was a business that was created by a business owned by an immigrant. And so the challenge for us is to avoid what happened 12 years ago during the recession, where we did not provide the funding, as has been stated by many of the folks on this panel, directly to our small business owners. I want to thank you, Claudia, for this platform to allow us to have this dialogue. And in conclusion, I just want to say that on behalf of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we're going to continue to be vigilant in making sure that our banks get the assistance that they need. The reason that many of the large banks have not provided the lending is because the information had not been provided to them as recently as last Friday. So it's really hard to do small business loans if you're a banker and you don't even have the information from the federal government to do that. I do know that, again, we're building the plane as it's being flown. These are unprecedented times. We do live in a capitalist and free enterprise system, but even before COVID-19, we all are aware that government was the largest buying service in the world, the U.S. Department of Defense. So we need to put these small businesses in the supply chains of Fortune 500 companies. As Claudia, you and I have talked about, federal government does less than 7% of its business with small business. So the catalyst for the future is big business and the federal government making sure that small businesses are supported and given the resources that they need. And just to summarize, we will continue to put information about the Paycheck Protection Program out there to as many of our small businesses. Right now, they need information, technology, and assistance. Many of our community banks, many of our minority community lending institutions need to be given the opportunity to provide this capital also. And so we will continue to fight for our small Latino-owned businesses. They're the future economic engine of this economy. And I do believe that through your efforts and everyone on this call, that beyond the COVID-19, this is an opportunity that will come from crisis that will position us well, because we are instinctive fighters as Latinos and Latinas. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
And Ramiro, 3 things just on that. One is on the need to be to advocate. If you don't mind, just like, let's make sure that we connect so that we can instruct the community of what exactly do we need to be advocating for, and how do we do that. Number 2 is, yes, indeed, we need to understand better how to make sure that we have the platforms and the visibility for the supply, so that we can become part of the supply chain. And you and I have been speaking about how we're going to use the Hispanic Promise and other instances that we have, so that we can go back to corporate America and say, step up, these are the 10 ways where you can do that. Ramiro Cavazos, thank you so much for being with us. Until next Tuesday, I want to welcome our last speaker, and Jason Marczak, who's the director of the Adrienne Arsht, the Latin America Center of the Atlantic Council. Jason, all of us have an incredible concern right now here in America, but I already started looking at Latin America. My mother, she's hospitalized with COVID in Mexico City, and I think that we're going to start seeing increasingly people, like closer to us, closer to our families and our friends in Latin America, that has probably a 2 to 3 week delay from COVID itself, from like even the first beginning of the health, and how is it going to go. Jason, give us your perspective. What's going to happen in Latin America, and how can we, as Hispanics in the States, collaborate and take action to help?
Well, first of all, Claudia, thank you very much for having me, and great to be on this call with Ramiro, Fabian, Cristina, Gillian. And first of all, Claudia, I hope your mother gets healthy and safe as quickly as possible, and I hope the same is for everyone's families. At the Atlantic Council, we're a global institution. We've been tracking how COVID-19 has global geopolitical ramifications. I direct our Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center, where we're providing understanding analysis across Latin America. I couldn't agree with you more, Claudia. I think right now, where we are rightfully so is focused, as we've been doing on this call, focus on the implications in the United States, focus on the implications for our Latino community in the United States. But the next wave of coronavirus is already unleashed its wrath and will continue to do so across Latin America. I've been tracking even the number of cases across the region, and you see a pretty large increase on a 48-hour basis. You have at this point, as of today, over 35 cases across Latin America, with most of those cases currently in Brazil, over 12,000 cases in Brazil, followed by Chile with 4,800. Ecuador, as many of you might have seen some of the news in Guayaquil with regard to challenges and frankly picking up corpses. Ecuador with 3,800. Peru, Mexico, of course, over 1 in 6 Latinos in the United States are of Mexican origin. Mexico has about 2,500 cases, and the list goes on. The coronavirus across Latin America has really taken hold. And frankly, across the region, you have 27 countries at this point that have registered more than 1,300 coronavirus-related deaths across the region, with Brazil, Ecuador, and Mexico being the top 3. The controlling the spread of coronavirus in Latin America is particularly challenging for a number of reasons. One of which is the informal economy. You have over half of workers across the region are in informal employment. And so as we've been doing in the United States with social distancing and working from home and all the great work that many companies on this call are doing, that's frankly impossible for many people across the region. And we've been doing webinars and I've been having conversations with colleagues across the region. It's very difficult, as all of you know, when you're in the informal economy to stay home. If you don't go to work, you can't put food on your table. And if you can't put food on your table, then your family doesn't eat. So that's the real reality. And so the informal economy makes the social distancing very challenging, as well as the fact that in the Southern Hemisphere, we are approaching flu season. So you have coronavirus impact with regard to the spike in flu cases that we'll see across the region. I can go into what a number of governments across the region have been taking incredibly proactive steps, from national quarantines to phased-in regional quarantines, to economic relief measures for workers, conditional cash transfer programs for workers, giving the opportunity to not pay for certain utilities across the region. And actually what we've been seeing in Latin America is actually some countries actually working together in a way that we haven't seen in other parts of the US. In other parts of the world. What we've also seen is we've seen China stepping up. We've seen China providing ventilators. We've seen China providing masks. We've seen China providing test kits across Latin America. Mexico, for example, recently accepted a number of mass test kits from China. And this is frankly being done in the absence of U.S. leadership in being able to provide those types of assistance across the region. So what can be done as Hispanic leaders? That's the big question for Latin America at this point. I think one thing is the importance of providing these continued employment opportunities, because what we're starting to see is a significant drop in remittances across the region, right? And remittances are fundamental, especially for countries across the region. Central America countries, anywhere from 15 to 20% of the GDP depends on remittances. I think also some of the best practices in online education are also things that can be shared, as students across Latin America are also being forced to stay home and try to work from home. But this is a real opportunity to also stay close. I think as we hopefully will see a flattening of the curve in the United States, and as some of the mass-produced ventilators and other types of equipment and medical know-how can be transferred and shared with countries across the region, as the curve continues to increase across Latin America, I think that would be of tremendous utility as well, in addition to other ideas.
Remittances might be challenging, particularly if we're challenged ourselves. But I think that in a world of distrust of media and government all across Latin America, the peer-to-peer and family sharing best practices and experiences as much as corporations can do upside down. I don't think that we have that in our mindset, how much of a role Hispanic leaders can play. And I think that Ramiro is nodding because we know that we can do more for Latin America. I want to thank you all for these 45 minutes of the weekly update on COVID-19. We do this every Tuesday. The goal is to inform our Hispanic leaders to make sure that we're not only informed, but better taking decisions. We're prepared to better take decisions, and that we can share that with our communities. We do that in a way to make sure that we are a clearinghouse for information, but also for action. So thank you all, everybody, for being here as a speakers, as audience, and looking forward to see you next Tuesday. Goodbye. Stay safe and stay home.